Hi folks, Slick Slices here. Back in my youth, I used to go in for nice big chunky knives. I used to have my 21306 naval rigging knife was one of my first pocket knives, and that's a chunk of steel if ever there was one. When I was 10, I got an 8-inch bladed Bowie knife, which I thought was fantastic. But you know, when I was a child, my thoughts, my deeds, my words were those of a child. When I was fully grown, I put away those childish things and I went to work in a suit. And from the age of about 19, 20, I worked in a suit for the better part of 30 years. So the idea of putting a great big chunk of steel like that in your pocket never made any sense. So instead, I would carry a small pocket knife, and that might have been at times a Swiss Army knife, but more as things settled down, I ended up carrying one particular knife for a long time, and that was this. And it's nothing special, particularly. I don't know what its what its value is or value was, but the little silver tern is a Japanese made, I suspect made by Moki, but I don't have absolute proof of that. But a little Japanese lockback knife, stainless steel handles, 440 stainless steel, but it doesn't say what sort of 440, but I suspect 440A. But this lived in my pocket, a vanadium stainless steel, it says on the blade. This thing lived in my pocket, nothing on the other side, for a long time. At about the same time that I bought that, though, I also bought this, which is a little Spyderco Ladybug, which I bought for my lady wife. I don't know if I bought it because it was called a Ladybug, because I didn't actually know it was called a Ladybug until quite recently. I just knew it was a little Spyderco. And this is also a Japanese lockback knife, and it is probably also made by Moki. A lot of these were. But since then, I've accumulated quite a lot of small pocket knives. Many Japanese, but there's a little Chinese Barlow from JE made. Of course, there's inevitable the little Swiss Army SD Classics. I've got a nice little one here in Alox, which is just quite a smart little knife. This little Moki that is actually genuinely made by Moki and sold by Moki. It's a tiny little knife, mother of pearl, which is just a very beautiful little thing. And I've picked up a few. There's a couple of case knives, a little mini hunter that came out of their Vault series, the little Butterbean or Baby Canoe, and even the Rough Rider Cub, which is a lovely little lock knife. What a lot of these have in common is that they are lockbacks, and a lot of them are Japanese, and I've become particularly fond of collecting Japanese knives over the years, and so that's really where I'm going with this today, is to look at some of the little Japanese ones. So we take out some of these European knives and American knives and Chinese knives, and we're left with some of these lovely little Japanese knives. Now, as I say, this one was in my pocket for a long time. This one was in my wife's pocket for a long time. Now, in UK now, lockback knives are weapons of mass destruction. Now, if you're watching this and you don't know these knives, you're not familiar with them, you might not realise just quite how small we're talking here. That is a standard Swiss Army knife, 91mm referring to the handle, and it's got I don't know, a sort of 65 millimeter blade, something like that, I don't know. Certainly well under 3 inches. And equally, here is a Sheffield Barlow. So, you know, these little knives are really pretty small. but if they're small, some like the Moki and some of these little Higo Nakamis, and these little Higos are smallest sizes that I think they do commonly. There's probably somebody somewhere that makes a little tiny baby one just to show off. This one here is a rather nice little one. I'm going to do a thing on Higo Nakami, so I'll not concentrate on these too much. But it's a little wooden one with a Damascus blade, which is quite pretty. And say the Moki. But, so more recent ones though that I wanted to really show you today is what I was really getting at. I've had this, let's say these two for a long time, and they're in relatively primitive steels. I've never really big fan of the serrations. This is also a chisel grind, which was a Sal Glesser innovation. I don't know if he invented that, but that was something that he really promoted. But they still make the Ladybug, and I have one of the latest versions, and this is really what I wanted to show you today. This is the same size, and this is again a tiny little knife. But if you want to just open packages and open letters and things like that, a little knife like this will do the job as well as any larger knife, and sometimes perhaps better than most. And like I say, I lived in a suit and tie, going to work for 30 years of my life, and to pull out something little and small as this in an office was just useful, and nobody thought of it as being problematic. I do have another that's sort of in this vein, which is another modernish one, which I really like. I've done a video on this one before, which is the Volkniven U4 when it's laminated 3G steel. So this is a little plastic handle, little lockback mechanism, tiny little blade, but really good quality steel that works really well. And as I say, it's a great little aid in the office without upsetting anybody. But of course, they're all lockbacks, and they are therefore officially weapons of mass destruction in Britain. And I mean, I find that alarming and disturbing, ridiculous, all sorts of whatever. Put whatever word you like in there, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of Americans who will come on here and say, that's horrendous, how do you let them get away with that? Why don't the people rise up? The truth is, it's the people that want it. People like the idea of being kept safe in their homes and so on, and they see restricting knives as being kept safe in their homes. And most of them wouldn't give any thought to whether a locking knife or a non-locking knife is more or less threatening. They just think lock knives, they're sold the story. Lock knives are dangerous. Lock knives are only one reason you'd want a lock knife is so you can stab people. It's all nonsense. You know it, I know it, but a lot of people in this country are very happy with that as a story, and they're very happy to go along with it and drive it forward. Anyway, what I really was, before I started on this rant, what I was going to show you was how the Ladybug has developed over the, it's at least 20 years since I bought that one. It's back in the days when I could walk. So I would say 20, possibly 25 years ago. So a few things have changed, although the knife is ostensibly the same. But let's go through it. First of all, the blade shape has changed slightly. It's become taller. It's still pretty much the same length, I think. It may have grown a millimetre or two, but it's certainly got taller, and the spidey hole has got bigger. Secondly, this was a sabre grind with this half serrated, half plain edge. I don't know, they probably still do well, in fact I know they still do serrated versions of the little knives. Whether they actually do the Ladybug in a serrated or not, I don't know. But so yeah, so the blade shape has changed a little bit. I don't know what the steel was in this, it doesn't say on it. And bear in mind just when it was. If you're lucky, it will be 440 A, but I'm not entirely certain. I'm sure Tobias will come on and tell us in the comments what steel it is. This one is K390, and K390 is, I don't know if it's a super steel as much. It's a tool steel, really. So it's a semi-stainless steel. It's not like your 440s, which are pretty stainless. This will corrode. It will particularly take on a patina quite easily if you use it for any food use. But it's also very hard. I think it's around 62 or 63 Rockwell, which means that it retains an edge for a long time. I don't think they're that difficult to sharpen though, because I've sharpened another K390. I haven't sharpened this one, but I've sharpened another K390 knife, and it sharpened up quite easily. And as I say, they do hold their edge very well. Now, next thing on the blade that has changed quite a bit, and this seems to be a thing, jimping. Now, I don't like jimping. I think jimping just makes a knife uncomfortable, and I can't really see any great purpose to it. Other people will disagree. I get that. It's obviously popular, or they wouldn't keep doing it. But it's not something I don't think it's a step forward. The simple shape of this blade gives you enough of a thumb ramp if that's what you want. Though generally speaking, with these little knives, I tend to use them in a pinch grip. They seem to just work that way for me. Anyway, there's no jimping on the back of that one, and on this one you get this really quite aggressive sort of little bit of jimping on the back of there. Right, so that's the blades. We'll move on to the handles. The construction has stayed apparently similar in that you've got this piece of moulded plastic. These are integral knives in the current parlance. That's to say it's a single piece of plastic. It's not two pieces screwed together. So there's no screw at the butt end of these knives or fixing of any type. It's just a moulded handle, and then the blade is put into it using a rivet and a pin. These pins, I think you could probably just push out. I don't think there's anything actually retaining them other than the pressure of the back spring against them. The pivots on these are riveted, which are very reminiscent of the Higo Nakami, and I would actually argue that this single piece of material with the blade sits into it with a rivet is where you see the origins of these modern Spyderco knives. They look ultra modern because they're plastic and they've got a sort of wacky blade shapes and so forth, but they're actually quite a traditional pattern of knife, only with the addition of a lockback. So these are still to this day riveted and pinned, rivet and pin, which is unusual in the current day and age. You'd expect them to be screwed together, but they're just not. It means they're not adjustable, but as I say, this one's 25 years old. There's no significant blade play in it, and it's not as though it's not been used. It's been used and worked quite hard. They're both backlocks. The most significant change to the backlock obviously is the buoy dent. So this has a dent in the back of it, which is supposed to stop you accidentally pressing the lock. Honestly, I've never found that a problem. One could argue that it makes it slightly easier to find the lock. In my case, as I have next to no feeling on my fingers, it probably makes not a jot of difference. But I certainly never find myself accidentally pressing the back lock on this one and having it. Actually, this one doesn't really, you have to really give it a dunt to make it fall shut. This new one does. Oops. This new one does Oops, I can't get to do it now. I did it a minute ago. There we are, it does fall shut. So that's quite a nice improvement in the action. Now the other things that have changed, we've got a bigger lanyard hole now, which I think is because people started putting 550 paracord lanyards on these things. I have put 550 paracord lanyards on things. I'm not 100% certain that I'm really sold on it, but I do think sometimes with these little knives that they do add a bit of length to them, which does give them some extra utility. I should actually, just while I'm thinking about it, this is made in exactly the same construction. Again, you've a one-piece plastic moulding, a pin, only you do have a screw, a torque screw fastening the pivot on this, but you can see very clearly that these have a very similar heritage. They might just, on the first glance, look completely different, but once you start to consider them, if you were to sort of sit and describe them, you'd find they have a similarity. Another similarity, which I forgot to mention really, and one of the reasons why I particularly like these is, though I'm right-handed, but my right hand's paralysed, I love an ambidextrous knife, and the Spydercos are very ambidextrous, particularly these ones because they don't have a pocket clip. But that Spidey hole, because it's a hole, it's the same on both sides. And the Falkniven uses a nail nick, but as with most Falknivens, they put the nail nick on both sides, so it's a genuinely ambidextrous knife. So, yeah. Now, but the other real change that's come over time in the Spyderco is the shape of the handle. Sorry, the pattern of the handle. This had a sort of square blocks which give it some texture, but this has what's known as the volcano grip. So you've moved the Spyderco logo to the middle of the handle rather than one end, and from then these little blocks fan out and they're all angled up and away from that center. So that means you get traction on the blade in different directions depending on whether your finger's at the front of the knife or the back of the knife. I don't know how much difference it really makes on a tiny little knife like this, but I think it's clearly a step forward, and they look much nicer than some of the other Spydercos, like the slip joint Spydercos, for example. Like the, this is the Urban, which has a slip joint action, and the UKPK and the Squeak. So the Squeak's smaller than this, the UKPK is bigger than this, and the Urban is the middle. They don't have that volcano grip. They just have this sort of moulded FRN with just a sort of uniform checkering on it, which is just not as nice. I cannot get to like these. I've had the Squeak, this is the Urban, as I say, and I've had the UKPK, which is the larger version, and I just don't like them. I keep this one just as kind of a reference, but I've got rid of the others. But these are street legal in the UK, so they have their place. But anyway, this has taken the modern design of the volcano grip, which is now universal across the entire range. And finally, on the back of the knife, I can get these two to turn up together. We've got, as well as the jimping on the blade, which I don't like, we've got this ribbing on the handles, which I do like, because I think that does give some added grip without them being just straightforwardly unpleasant, which I think the jimping is straightforwardly unpleasant. We've done it on the Urban 2 and added it on the inside of the finger trial that you get with these. It's funny, I don't know if it'll come over in a video like this, but I really like these volcano grip handles, and I really dislike these intensely. and I don't really think it will come over, but these just feel cheap. These feel lightweight, practical, low drag, you know, the quality just feels cheap. I don't know. Anyway, so that's really all I wanted to show, was the evolution of this little Spyderco Ladybug. It's the smallest knife I think they do in the sort of ordinary Spyderco plastic handled ranges, and as I say, these are out of Seki City in Japan, which is one of the reasons why I like them, and I've got a couple of these. Anyway, so thank you very much for watching. I hope this hasn't been too boring. If you do like this stuff, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and remember to ring the bell if you want to see when the next one comes up. Thank you very much. Bye.